and welcome back to the Hot Lap, where you are looking at a brand new track layout of, if you've guessed it, the Singapore Grand Prix. 3 DRS activations, as you can see in purple, but that's not the thing we're looking at. Now, if we're going to play a Spot the Difference, we've got here is the old track I found, a picture of the old track I found, and take particular note between turn 14 and turn 21, because you'll see a very exciting change, as in it's basically just a straight. Look, there we go. Turn 14 and 15 and 16, they've taken away quite a few turns, and obviously interesting, no DRS. So what will this mean for the cars, so to speak? What's it going to mean for the teams? Well, interestingly, more straights could potentially mean Red Bull are going to be faster. Having said that, they haven't added an extra DRS zone, so surely that's a good thing for us. In terms of turny bits, I mean, that could affect maybe Mercedes with more straight. They weren't amazingly fast in Monza. However, we start to wonder how good Ferrari are going to be on what is still a twisty circuit. They're really good at Monza on those straights, really fast. But you got to look back at Zandvoort, just the race before, the week before, where Ferrari struggled a bit. So after throwing everything at Monza, it's going to be really interesting to see how Ferrari do. And it's also going to be really interesting to see how McLaren do. They did really well. Kind of like average at Monza, if I'm honest. But really, really well at Zandvoort, and basically doing really well at most races since Silverstone. Mercedes, kind of like a bit of an unknown, but you kind of guess they're going to be there or thereabouts. Definitely one of the favourites for the second best team. Perez won this last year. Verstappen kind of struggled in the race. One of the few races he did struggle at, because it is hard to overtake here. And he did make, lo and behold, a few mistakes. There's hope for any non-Verstappen fans or that don't want Red Bull to completely rinse and destroy this season. I mean, I've found a video on YouTube here. It's from Formula 1 to 2023, and interesting, I think Formula 1 2022 by Moto Games there. Let's definitely give them a like if we're going to have a look at their video. As you can see here, we're gonna start, basically, it's the new circuit versus the old circuit. So as you can see here, they're on the start finish straight, and they're going to go into the first chicane, lap turns 1, 2, and 3, which is obviously going to be the same. Really, really similar. And we're going now through the first of the DRS. We're going to go through we're near the first of the DRS activation zones, and we're going to just continue playing it. And down this basically long straight here. It's interesting though, because it's not really a straight, because it does kind of have a turn, doesn't it? But there we go. We do see passes here as they come into the left-hander. It'd be interesting to see how strict they are on track limits coming into that during the race. So, and this is quite a twisty. It's quite a twisty circuit, isn't it? This is where we're coming up to now. The Singapore weird sling chicane used to be a nemesis of Kimi Räikkönen, because I think he kind of became a cropper there, didn't he? Now, interestingly, now we're going into the second DRS zone, is that one of the slowest corners on the track, down that hairpin and going straight down. Once again, not exactly a perfect straight, let's say, but there we go. And it's near here where things start to change. You can see like you can see the Salesforce thing, and as you can see, if I just roll it a tiny bit back here, as you can see, the car will just carry on straight. So the car on your left hand of the screen, that's the old one. On the right hand is the new one, and on the left hand he's turning right, he's braking to go right. But on the right hand on the new track, he's just keeps going straight. And then obviously we get to the right hander. Now where's that right hander? Well, if any of you remember, the going underneath the tunnel, that's now gone. The tunnel, or the carriageway, or basically above. And then he enters and then here we come with the right hander, basically the end of that, the start of sector 3, essentially. And as they're both now coming towards the end of the lap, we're going to have the detection for that last DRS zone, and that kind of like double double left-hander coming into the start-finish straight, and there's essentially our next DRS zone. So thank you very much for Moto Games for doing that. Absolutely fantastic. That was about 12 days ago, so fair play. That's on F1 23 if you want to download it. That's essentially the new track layout. So before we get into any more news about Singapore, there's an interest. Autosport have a really interesting article about the future tyre supply. They've suggested that probably going to be Pirelli, but the F1 tyre tender is up, and that's for 2025 to 2028. If Pirelli get it, that's going to be 18 years. 18 years they would have been in Formula One, but they've suggested that could also be Pirelli's last, because what have Pirelli still got to prove in Formula One? Now, the plot twist that Adam Cooper from Autosport is suggesting is that if this is going to be Pirelli's last, then maybe the other tyre supplier that want it, Bridgestone, maybe they just bring in Bridgestone now to kind of like save face. What they can't do, apparently, it's kind of against Formula One and all the commercial deals they do. They can't say Pirelli this year to 28 and then give Bridgestone the one the next year. I think it's kind of like almost like a government where they have to have like a tender when they, for example, want somebody's services or buy products. A lot of governments, I think in the UK, will like have like a tender and have people like almost bid for the service, and normally either take the cheapest one or the best valued one. And I imagine that's what Formula One has to do each time this tender comes in. So that's what's basically happening there. But Adam Cooper goes on to say that the issue is it could leave Formula One without a tyre supply in 2029 unless Bridgestone are happy to do it. But then if Bridgestone is going to be that sole supplier for 2029, they're going to have full reign in it, and then F1 might get a good deal for Bridgestone, but will potentially get the lesser deal, unless obviously you have your like Michelin and Hankook tyres are potentially having one eye on that as well. So that's going to be certainly interesting going into 2025. I don't know when that it's going to be announced. I'd like to think surely it's going to be announced by the end of this year, who's going to be the tyre supplier for 25 and onwards. And also, if you remember, Bridgestone did really well. I mean, the first Bridgestone champions were Mika Hakkinen, first Bridgestone winner. Could have been Olivier Panis, though. There were a couple of times in 97 with those Bridgestone tyres. It was Bridgestone and Goodyear. But in 98, it was Goodyear versus Bridgestone and Mika Hakkinen in the McLaren. And David Coulthard finished second. It was a McLaren won two, and McLaren won both championships in 98. But the Bridgestone tyres is more synonymous, probably, with the Ferrari team, because they basically powered them, tired them, I don't know what you want to call it, to pretty much all their successes with Michael Schumacher from 2000, I think, to 2006. So that's certainly powered to 2006 until he retired, and Schumacher winning from 2000 to 2004. Bridgestone did have that interesting 2005 bad thing when we had that one tyre. It was both Bridgestone and Michelin, but you had to have the tyre on for the whole race, and you couldn't pit. It's a bit of a silly idea in hindsight, but I think Bridgestone teams struggled a lot more than the Michelin teams. But there we go. And race fans have got an interesting roundup going into the Singapore Grand Prix. Russell has come out and said Mercedes slipped on simple things by over-analysing. Yeah, Mercedes' George Russell has said that his time have been guilty of focusing too much on the finer details prior to a return from the summer break. Mercedes have been frustrated, as we know, to try and catch their Red Bull, and George Russell has come out and said, I think when I perform best is when it just sort of comes to me and not over-analysing things. Russell told Select Media, including race fans. He said it's very difficult to not overanalyze things when you're slightly on the back foot. You really feel like you need to do more to improve and work harder to find that solution. But sometimes you need to take one step backwards to go two steps forward and focus on the simple things. And that's perhaps something we've been focusing on too much on with detail and slipping up slightly on the more simple things that deliver the most amount of performance. I mean, you can't really blame them in a way. 2022, they came in, they weren't very good. They weren't as good as they thought they were with their no pods. They won a race with the no pods in Brazil. Was that a false dawn? They then had the no pods at the beginning of this year, and they were kind of like in the same place as they were at the beginning of the 22 season. So there we go. Is that also the news roundup suggests that Singapore track changes could suit Williams. Now, Williams head of performance Dave Robson believes that the change of layout for this weekend's Singapore Grand Prix may suit their car. He said the float sequence in the final sector, as we've seen on that video, of the Marina Bay circuit is being bypassed for the first time this year due to renovations in that area. Now, asked if Singapore will be a true test of their car's performance, Robson said, "I think it probably will." And he goes on to say that obviously the change in circuit layout probably helps us because 4 corners have been taken away, Robson continued. So that's probably helpful. That does change the characteristic quite a lot for everyone. Hopefully that plays more to the strengths of this car. So there we go. And that, I mean that's pretty much the news roundup going. It's been a bit of a slow news weekend without Formula One, but we will be going into the week, and we'll be looking. Obviously, we've got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is going to be our race preview. Friday we'll be looking at practice. Saturday we'll be obviously looking at the qualifying, and Sunday we'll have our race review this time. Hopefully on time. Hopefully I won't be going into the sea too long like I did last time, being a bit ill. That's ultimately what happened there. So it's a bit too early to kind of tell what the weather's going to be like. It was wet, I think, last year, but also we've got in the next 2 weeks, we've got in the next week, basically a week apart, we've got the Japanese Grand Prix as well. Lawson in for both. No Ricciardo, I think, has pretty much been unofficially, if it's not been officially confirmed from Red Bull. We had that Red Bull story the other day about helmet marker apologising. Be interesting to see what comes out of that. We probably won't see too much about that until maybe Thursday to the official press conferences, unless something else is said. But there we go. And I just want to say thank you so much for the people that are subscribed. The few, but let's make it the many. Thank you. You are a F1 race winner. And also, thank you to anyone that likes the videos. That honestly, that does make a huge difference. It gives me a smile when I get that alert, and makes it kind of worthwhile. And anyone that does both and subscribe, you are a true F1 champion in my eyes. Thank you so much. Anyway, this has been the Hot Lap. This has been our It's Race Week edition. We will see you next time.